So my name is Kay Lima. I'm the director of INN Labs. And for today's panel, I'm joined by Evan McKinder, the director of audience development at News Revenue Hub, Lachlan Fields, the web and engagement editor of Mississippi Today, Francie Swidler, the social media editor of Colorado Public Radio. And they're all experts in audience development, engagement, and reach. And so we will be looking at that today in the context of a large traffic spike. And so, Evan, I'll turn it over to you for those key questions that will be shaping our discussion today.
Yeah, thanks, Kay. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. So I just want to thank INN for putting this together and for bringing us together. When we originally conceived of this panel, the original title was "Your Traffic is About to Go Gangbusters. Are you prepared for it?" And this was pre-COVID. So it was looking at the election. So COVID sort of gave us a really good opportunity to look at a period where traffic did go gangbusters for many of you. And what I'd like you to think about as we go through this panel in context is, did you make the most of that moment? Did you get the signups you wanted in your email list? Did you get the donations that you wanted from your members and subscribers? Were you able to harness all of the traffic that came through and convert those folks? So we're going to talk a lot about conversion and how to make the most of future traffic spikes. They could be COVID and they could be the election. So the key questions that we're sort of lining up to try and answer today is, how do you plan in advance for a big story? What should you prioritize during a huge traffic spike in the moment, and what to do with all those new readers? So we're going to look at these traffic spikes from some three angles: the before, the moment of, and what to do when the dust settles. So the first part that we're going to tackle is what to do in advance. And what we would really recommend is that you come up with a plan. You come up with a plan now. The election's about 5 months away. Like I said, the news cycle has been absolutely incredible between COVID, the protests, and it's only going to get busier. So start a plan now. What we would recommend you do is start by convening what we're calling a big swing task force. So think in your planning in advance about big marquee stories that you might have coming down the pipeline. These could be related to the news cycle, but more likely the better context for coming up with a plan is related to a big swing piece that you have had in the pipeline for a long time, took a long time to write, took a long time to edit, takes a lot of resources. So stories very rarely go viral by themselves. It takes some careful planning and it takes interdepartmental input. What we recommend you do is in this task force, sorry, Miranda, can you go back one slide? I'm moving a little slowly. We recommend you bring together representatives from 4 sections of your newsroom. Obviously, you want the story editor who edited the piece, who's very familiar with it. If you have an audience or a comms team, they should be involved in this meeting as well, so that you can talk about preparation for distribution. You're going to take careful approach to your art, and your production folks should be in the room also, whoever's copywriting or eventually going to hit publish. Okay, now we can go to the next slide. So maybe you don't have all those pieces in your newsroom. Maybe you don't have all of those roles. You can think about it in terms of what you'll need to publish this piece in advance. So before you hit publish, what we're recommending that you have are really strong headlines, obviously. And that's not just your article headline, but you should also have a headline for the homepage. That might be a separate headline from the article. You should also have a headline for social. That might be a little bit more social friendly than your on-page headline, for example, and a separate headline also for search. So an SEO headline is typically what we have. And if you use Yoast in the WordPress Yoast is a plugin where you can optimize your SEO headlines also, and we'll have a resource for you all at the end of that to help with that. Your audience team should be all up on promotion. So your audience team should be helping write those headlines, but also thinking about social. And we're going to have Francie Swither talk all about social promotion, and Lachlan Fields talk about other ideas for how to maximize impact in terms of partnerships and on-page modals and other aspects. You obviously want great art, and you want that art to be adaptable, not just for, again, the article, but where everyone is finding it through what you can think of as sideways traffic. So on social media, your art should translate well to Facebook, your art should translate well to Twitter, your art should translate well to Google News. Think about your art and your headlines, not just in terms of what folks are doing and reading it on the article itself, but how the other areas they might be finding it. And lastly, the preparation point is defined roles. One way to think about this is who's going to deploy the newsletter sign up if your piece does go viral. Who's ready to do that? Who's coming up with the promotion plan? Who's coming up with all of those elements that we've been talking about? So one piece of this that I want to address also is if your team and your newsroom doesn't know that a big story is coming, then it's really, really, really hard, if not impossible, to prepare for the big story. So if your newsroom right now, at this moment, doesn't have a process to communicate interdepartmentally about big stories, if you don't have an editorial meeting that involves your audience team and maybe even your business team or your membership team, get them involved now so that everybody can be prepared for when a big story comes down so that you can make the most of this moment. And with that, I think we turn it over to Lachlan Fields.
Yeah, thanks, Evan. So at Mississippi Today, we rely on a 10-point approach to reach and engage with our audience. This is an approach that kind of developed based on the varied backgrounds of my team. We all kind of come from different places, but all have journalism backgrounds. So we developed this, and so once we know a story or a series is in the works, and it has the potential to sort of go viral or be one that drops a lot of traffic, we get to work with a plan just using this approach. And I'll kind of walk you through how these sort of work. So you can go to the next slide, Miranda, sorry. So the first thing we think about is experience. How are we going to give the user what they need really to move through our site and get to these big stories? So a good example of one that we had is a recent series we had on the Mississippi Democratic Party. It was a 3-part series. And as soon as our editor-in-chief told us that this was happening, we really got to work thinking through all the elements that we needed to have in place. So we want to make sure that it's branded, so readers were aware of this, that we have this series coming. We also knew we wanted to keep our readers engaged. So we really thought through those audience first kind of approaches of what is it that they will be asking and what will they need from this. And the next one is not one that really applied to this particular series, but it's one that we think about a lot, is data and multimedia. If there's a way that we can help break down the story for the reader, then we like to have data visualizations or any kind of multimedia elements in place in the story. And we also think through, like, how are we going to present the story? We have an opportunity to get a glance of the stories prior to publishing and can use different things. Like we have a long form template that has a different kind of display if it's a longer story. And we also, have the ability to use some different elements, colors and graphics and larger photos. You can go to the next slide, sorry. So the next thing that we think about is delivery. How are we going to get the information to the readers so they know that this big story is coming? So we really think through the SEO, make sure that they're going to be able to put in what words they're going to be putting into search engines are going to actually lead them to us. So we think through all the SEO components in a story. We also think about social media. Make sure we have the branded graphics that we use in the beginning to promote the story there, but also, want to make sure that we have a good solid plan for delivering the stories through social media, which Francie will talk more about her approach, which is very solid, and I've learned a lot from her. I think you all will. Audience growth is another thing, is one of our buckets, and that's just making sure that we have our newsletter signups have the right kind of language. We also push through our texting line and web push alerts if there's an opportunity to have a teaser, a story for the Mississippi Democratic Party series. Our editor-in-chief actually wrote a story that would introduce the series. So that gave us something that we could really push out to our readers to kind of set them up to know that we were going to be having these 3 parts, and just sort of kind of put the breadcrumbs out for them to follow us on that. The next thing we think about, if you could go to the next slide, sorry, is the conversion. So like if we're going to get people to our site, what are we going to do with them once they are there? And of course, we want to make them more loyal readers. So we want them to sign up for our newsletter. We also want them to become members. So we oftentimes will think through how we can create a customized inline campaign that will lead people to our donation page where they can make donations, and gives us a chance to kind of show them that this is a part of our mission, and we're supported by members. Another thing that we've done is is one of our engagement buckets is events. Of course, that's sort of changed with everything recently, but we do, in planning, we look for any additional ways that we can engage with our audience. So now, since we aren't doing in-person events, we're kind of thinking through, like, how can we do more virtual things to engage on that with readers and talk about specific coverage.
Great. And so now Francie is going to talk about, in terms of preparation, what to think about for your social media strategy.
Yeah, so I like to think about social with big projects or with any story as sort of platform by platform. How can you speak the language of each platform? And sure, we see referral traffic from social. Those numbers are growing, but it's not near what we see from SEO. And so I like to think of how can we speak the language of each platform? Another way to think about that is how can you use the native tools of each platform to create a better social plan for more sustained engagement or more sustained referral traffic. So it's sort of thinking about it more of playing the long game. So the 3 steps I'll talk about are being intentional about each platform, and how you can use that platform to your story's advantage, setting clear expectations between what it means to share your story or promote your story, referral traffic versus conversation producing, and then documenting what you're doing, making it easy on yourself to go back and revisit what you did, and pay attention to your audience, how they're responding, see if a certain theme is coming up in comments that you're seeing. So thinking about being intentional about each platform, I try to apply this exercise to bigger stories, and I try and get the reporters or the editors or any of the stakeholders who are working on that big project to help me fill out this exercise so we can fill it out together. And I try to help them think a little bit more creative about objective and tactics and how to measure success. So on the left is sort of that example that I was talking about. If you walk through this for each platform, how will Facebook be used for this story? How will Twitter be used for this story? How will Instagram be used for this story? Beyond just sharing the story or promoting the story. here's an example on Facebook. We had a big series about a teen series about teens telling things in their own words, and had several different stories about in that series. And we sort of tried to nail down that one of the stories in that series, the objective for Facebook, which people love talking about their experience on Facebook. We wanted the story on Facebook to produce conversations and get shared among parents with teens, primarily in rural Colorado. So maybe one of your tactics in that case would be a paid post or a targeted post on Facebook. Some of the tactics we used were changing the cover image, sharing the story in different parent groups, and targeted or boosted posts, like I said. How do we measure success? And this is definitely something that I think is important to fill out with the reporter and editor, because you're not necessarily, a social person isn't necessarily pushing a viral button. So sort of determine that. How, maybe one of the measures of success is that your stories will get shared more widely in parent groups, or that you have down the road, you have a larger audience among more diverse parents or something like that. So sort of walking through each of those exercises with each of those platforms. And then on the right is sort of an example of that. So one of our teen stories in that series was about teen language and how teens communicate via text. And so on Twitter, we wanted to, the objective was to show the story without telling it and basically get our audience's attention. So that first tweet with all the different versions of okay definitely did that. The tactic, or one of the tactics, was a poll thread where the audience could sort of experience the story and hopefully eventually read it. I mean, it was linked in the last tweet. And then the measure of success was more about engagement. So I wanted the number of people participating in each poll to be high, a higher number than we usually see. And I think we had 5 polls in this thread. So adding a bunch of polls into a thread sort of helped us to increase our average engagement rate for that month. And it helped us to sustain that increased engagement rate over the next few months. So sort of measuring the long-term success here, or playing the long game with Twitter rather than just sharing the story, tweeting it once, and moving on. And then a few, going into a little bit more detail about the rest of the steps for the social plan. It's always really important to set expectations with the rest of the people working on that story, and even the rest of the newsroom, about what you can get from social and what the intention of social is. A lot of times when we have large stories, the word people say to me is, well, we'll be promoting it on social. And I always like to respond with, does that, okay, then who are we targeting? And are we talking about paid social? Or are we encouraging people to share it? Are we writing the social headline in a way that encourages people to share it? So sort of try and set expectations between the difference between those two words. I also like to clarify what kind of referral traffic we usually see from those platforms, and what kinds of things the platform prioritizes. How can your story take advantage of those? So like, for instance, all of the platforms, I think they're sort of still a mystery, but they want you to stay on those platforms and have conversations on those platforms. It's great when you get referral traffic back, but how can you help your story to start a conversation on those platforms and keep it going there? How can you get your audience to stay on that platform and talk about that story? Getting together a social headline and other messaging. Evan talked about social headline a little bit earlier, but also other messaging means like, how is the rest of the newsroom talking about this story? Sometimes we have other people in the newsroom or in membership tweeting about it or posting on LinkedIn about it if it's a big investigation. Maybe there is a way you can just get with your team and write 2 sentences that people can share about the story. So the messaging is super clear. And then documenting and engaging. Keep track of what links, keep track of your links, like to certain Facebook posts and what you did and how it performed. That way you can go back during the debrief. Pay attention to what your audience is saying. So if you're seeing a bunch of comments come in with a certain question or about a certain theme with the story, that's something to raise with the team, because that might lead you to the next story, or it might lead you to another engagement opportunity. And then engage right back. I think a lot of times we post things and sort of let them happen, but it's important to respond when you can. That'll encourage other people to respond to you. And I think it's great when we have a big investigation or something like that, and we can provide a little transparency by responding to people when we can on those platforms.
And so now that you've been able to hopefully prepare by thinking about your strategy for different platforms, the different pieces of artwork that will be needed, who will be doing which roles, to tie it all together is to then look at how you want to measure everything within Google Analytics, and to be able to set those expectations within your newsroom as well about what you will be measuring, where it will be measured, and what success will look like at the end. So one way to prepare in Google Analytics is to just make sure that you have all of your key metrics actually coming through for your goals. That can be looking at, in terms of engagement, the time spent on site, perhaps the page depth, as well as any types of conversion tracking that you want to be looking at while you have this traffic spike. And making sure that you have your key audiences identified and segmented in Google Analytics so that you can go and look for those different segments, how things performed. And also, I mean, if you have the luxury of preparing before a traffic spike, or as you see it happening, make sure to annotate in Google Analytics any things that are happening that are outside of the norm. And that way you can go back and see right in Analytics, that's where that spike started. Here's what we did to capitalize on that. The other thing to note is that more traffic means faster testing. So the more people you have coming to your site, that's just more volume for you to be able to do any sort of A/B testing or split testing that you've been planning for your newsroom around calls to action, even just broader things like, you know, how you want to update your overall menu, or even a community engagement form. So planning that ahead, getting those tests ready with something like Google Optimize will help set you up to be able to utilize that. And lastly, Search Console. So you can conduct keyword research using either the, the Google AdWords research tool, or by looking into Search Console to see exactly what has been searched for up to that date to come to your site. And to also, we keep talking about these titles and headlines, so to be able to optimize your titles for search. And so you've prepared if you had the chance to, and now it's here. You've got this huge wave of traffic. And so, Evan, what do we do next?
Yeah, thanks, Kay. I know we're throwing a lot at you for the preparation section of this. And oftentimes you don't have the luxury of preparing, although hopefully this will get you a little bit organized before the next traffic spike. I think you can move into triage mode when you are getting a major traffic spike. Maybe you're just one person. So what are your priorities? You know, if you don't have a plan in place, or if you're caught flat-footed, or if you're just one person and you're just trying to like make it through each story that gets distributed, here's what we recommend prioritizing for a traffic spike. First things first, customize your calls to action on your page. So go to the actual article page that's spiking. Make sure, do you have, ask yourself, do you have a call to action here that's effective for your newsletter subscribers? Do you have, could you go a step further and customize the language on that call to action? So we have a photo here on the left that is from Bridge, Michigan. They did some customization when they started seeing massive traffic spikes around their COVID stories. They started customizing their newsletter call to action to work around coronavirus explicitly. And it was very effective. They got a lot of subscribers from that. And, it takes some time to write that copy, but not a lot of time. So and another tip on that is to make sure that you have access to your newsletter call to actions. That's another bullet that you can put in the plan so that you can go in and customize those. Same with your donation links. Can you customize the language around those? And the second bullet that we would recommend that you look at is adding any relevant recirculation links. So give your readers other stories to click on, something to do next after they read this piece. Maybe that's at the end of the piece, maybe it's midway through. Make sure that you have a recirculation link here, and that can be really, really simple. You don't need a module for that. I like to talk about the Washington Post's recirculation strategy, because oftentimes it's just bracketing another story in a series and linking it and then putting it right in the middle of the story. It's not disruptive, it's seamless. Other stories that you might have in your series, like with Lachlan and Mississippi Today's story, was a 3-parter. Having recirculation links that easily give readers the ability to go back and read the other parts of that series is really effective. Or maybe you just put another, if there is not another story in your series, you just put a popular link from the site in there as well. And then third, we would suggest you move right on to creating an email plan. How can you incorporate this story into your newsletter? Is it worth doing a fully separate email to alert all your subscribers about this really important story? And even further, is it worth writing an additional email to solicit donations off of the story? I know that for everybody, that's really a subjective choice, depending on the story, depending on the moment. Right now we're in a very emotional moment with the protests, and you'll have to think through as an editorial staff whether you can, whether it meets the moment for soliciting donations from that. But at the very least, I would suggest being bullish about sending around your story to your email list. After all, they did subscribe in order to read your content, and a lot of people are reading this piece if it's going viral. We also have in the News Revenue Hub, we have something called the traffic spike checklist that I wanted to flag, and we're going to send this deck around in these resources so that you can click on that link. This is actually a document that you can either print out or just bookmark. It's a Google Doc, and it gives you check boxes so that when your traffic is spiking, you can say, okay, do I have a call to action on the page? Is the language customized? Do I have a donation link on the page? Is the language customized? Can I go back and rewrite an SEO headline to see if I can get additional SEO traffic here? And we'll actually give you resources to show you how to think about SEO and also social and email as well.
And that leads us to Francie, who's going to talk a bit about some tools that you can use to find out where your traffic is coming from during this spike.
So CrowdTangle is a great tool to use. It's available for newsrooms, and there's several different ways you can use CrowdTangle. One of my favorite things to do is CrowdTangle has a great Chrome extension where you just install it, and once you have a story up, you can click on it, and it'll show you on public pages across Facebook, Twitter, Reddit and Instagram, who is sharing your story and how much engagement it got. You can also click on, all the way in the right column, you can click on their share of the story and see how they shared it, what the comments look like. I always find interesting stuff in there and sort of go down a little bit of a rabbit hole. But CrowdTangle is a great way to see, okay, this story is really popping on this certain platform. And then sort of take a deep dive into that platform and see what else you want to be doing there. If you're getting a ton of Facebook traffic from it or Facebook shares from it that you see from CrowdTangle, maybe your next step is to think about doing a Facebook Live with the reporter and the source or something like that. Another great way to see where your traffic is coming from on big stories or any stories is Reddit and using their domain checker. Reddit can be a little intimidating, I think, for people who aren't familiar with it. I'm not a Reddit expert, and but it's much easier to use and much more intuitive than I thought it was. So I always like seeing, by using their domain checker, which is just www.reddit.com/domain/your-site. So ours is reddit.com/domain/cpr.org. And then you can see in that domain checker which subreddits certain articles are being shared in, or if you see a subreddit coming up over and over and over again, that's sort of a signal to you, hey, here is an audience that is interested in our stories and our content. From there, you can kind of go to the next step, which is setting up a Reddit AMA in that subreddit. For example, we found that a lot of our stories started being shared in the subreddit R Denver, and specifically transportation stories about Denver. As far as I know, there isn't a separate transportation in Denver subreddit. So a lot of stuff about transportation and buses being late and trains being late and all that stuff was being shared in this one subreddit. So when we had a big story about service cuts coming to Denver's big transportation agency, we knew that that was an audience, a built-in audience that already cared about that topic. And we were able to quickly set up an AMA to do that after we had broken some news. And then to set up an AMA, I can drop this information in the chat also. All you need to do is email media@reddit.com, introduce yourself, and start the conversation. Reddit responds almost immediately, and they've been really, really great to work with. And then there's a lot on this slide, but you want to keep the conversation going. So there are many times when we've had stories that we were just regular stories and turned out to get a ton of traffic that we may or may not have been prepared for. But there were certain things that we could do on social that kept the conversation going. On Instagram, what we've done in the past is use the native tools inside the platform to continue engagement on that story. I like to think if a story is really taking off on a certain platform, maybe it will also be taking off on another platform. We just haven't given it that opportunity yet. So the two things I really like to do on Instagram is in a story is use a question sticker or a poll. Get people to do a thing that's really low maintenance and doesn't require a lot of brain power. So on the right is just an example of the story that we had, that the city of Denver was culling geese and then feeding that geese to needy families. And so many people across Facebook were commenting on this story. So we decided to just throw up the question sticker on, like, what do you think about this? And we must have gotten 70 to 100 responses on Instagram, and we just kept sharing those responses back. And it ended up not only increasing our engagement for Instagram, but getting more referral traffic back to the story. On Twitter, just quickly mobilizing, can you pin a thread to your profile? Can you re-up a thread or ask a reporter to do a thread about, what the reporting experience was like? Is there a photo thread that you can do? Maybe there are a bunch of photos that didn't make it into the story, or you're noticing that people aren't reading the whole story or staying on your page for that long. There are different elements that you can throw into Twitter and try and make the story feel new there. On Facebook, maybe you could do a separate photo post. I like to also find out what groups it's being shared in, try and reply to comments, change your cover image to the thing that everyone's talking about, or just literally post a status update asking a question about this story. We did that here there are tons of moths in Denver, not so much anymore, but about a month ago, they were everywhere. And we had a story about moths that people really cared about and wanted to comment on. We obviously shared that like we usually do. Then we also posted this question on Facebook and linked the story underneath it just to continue the conversation a little bit and see if different kinds of people or more people could see that post in a different way. On the website, is there a companion post you can make with a different SEO headline? We did that with the protests in Denver. We had several stories about protests, but not all the photos from those stories made it into those stories, depending on who was producing it. So we were able to get a new SEO headline out of just a straight up photo post. There's also different ways to reframe a story to make it feel more urgent, and maybe amplify certain things in it that an audience didn't necessarily see before. So if you have an evergreen story about things that are reopening due to coronavirus in your city, maybe there's a way you can re-up it on the website, like a breaking bar, or put it back in a certain spot, pin it somewhere, and call out that date. We have the first day of summer coming up, and Denverite, our hyperlocal site, has a story about things in the summer. What is your risk of catching COVID during some summer activities? We published that about 3 weeks ago, but it's something we want to bring back up now that the first day of summer is coming back, and just reframe it a little bit. And next slide.
Great. And so that will be Lachlan.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, sorry. So what we do when we notice that there's a lot of traffic coming to our site from one particular story or a series, a lot of that Evan already touched on, but we definitely want to make sure that people can easily get to the story. So we think about, go back to the branding aspect. We often will have a graphic in our sidebar that links into the story or the series. We also want to make sure that we're creating conversations, engaging on all the different platforms with our audience. And then we want to make sure that we're looking at our analytics and seeing what search terms people are using to get to the story or to the site. And so we can tweak those through the Yoast SEO plugin on the back end of our site. We also want to make sure that people are getting to us through newsletters. So we will often reprogram a story or series, even if it's not the first day that it's published. We'll go like second or third day and just remind people that they can go read that story just through an in case you missed it prompt. And we also want to make sure that we are creating the right opportunities for our readers to become members. So we might change the messaging up a little bit as we notice more of the reader trends, and definitely want to move them through our site. So we use the recirculation links and areas of our site so we can kind of guide them through to the next story.
Okay, and so now we're at the point where the traffic has receded, and Evan recommends that you start with a debrief.
Yeah, I think we're running a little short on time, so I'm going to run through these really quickly, but this one's super simple and almost always gets overlooked. Reconvene that big swing task force and ask yourselves in the meeting, what worked? How can we replicate it next time? What didn't work? Do we need to tweak our plan for next time? Are we all on the same page? Do we need to switch up roles? Do we have roles missing? And then it's a great opportunity to ask, is there a 2.0 story out there for your editorial team? Is there another story? Or is there another way to re-engage on social, as Francie was noting? I would also say that the great thing about these task forces is they create transparent accountability by default. They require trust. You have to really trust that each person in your department is going to execute. And if they're not executing, it's going to become pretty self-evident within that meeting, and you're going to have a discussion about it. So I know I work with a lot of newsrooms that don't have these meetings, they don't have these task forces, and they feel very siloed and very frustrated because they might be caught unaware that a big story is coming and they're expected to just sort of make it go viral magically rather than doing the preparation needed. I know those frustrations exist in your newsroom. Don't bring them into this meeting. If folks, the point of this meeting is to try and reorient that ship and try and start it going. So you need to really leave your axe to grind at the door and just start trying to move forward with a plan for next time. And then we really recommend, can you go to the next slide, Miranda? That you survey your new reader. So what do you do? The traffic spike's done, you've had your debrief. What do you do next? The first step that we recommend is for you to survey those new readers. During the coronavirus spikes, I've been working with a lot of newsrooms that got hundreds, if not thousands, of new subscribers to their email list. And the first question I've been getting from them is, what do we do with everybody? What do we do with all these new readers? And it's very hard to be a mind reader with your new readers. You just know that they came in through this major traffic spike. So we'd recommend you go in and to your email list and write up a really short survey. Welcome them to your newsroom if you don't already have a welcome series running, and ask them to take this quick 5-question survey. Here's 5 questions that you could ask them, among others. What are you interested in reading more of? You're new to the site. We're interested in hearing what news works for you. Also, what news is out there in your community that you're reading, so that you can get some insight into hopefully some other demographics that are represented here. In addition to what other news do you read in the community, what do you think of our newsletter? Is it working for you? You've been onboarded into this thing. Is it something that you're interested in? And if there was something else that your newsroom internally is thinking about experimenting with, it's a good opportunity to ask these folks, like, would you be interested in this type of product? Maybe it's a different newsletter, maybe it's tweaking your existing newsletter. Anytime you're throwing out a survey, providing that some time has passed since this traffic spike and they've been reading your product, your newsletter, you can ask them if they like it and if they might subscribe to this new product that you're considering.
And then the other thing to do is to learn from your missteps. So you can always do something. Sometimes it's just a news story. And we ran into that at Colorado Public Radio. We always had a story when Governor Polis was giving an update about COVID, but that reporter and editor who were working on that, writing through that story in real time, weren't necessarily prioritizing things like SEO or engagement buckets. So sort of the digital team had to think about, okay, what does our audience need to know, and what is the question that they're asking for themselves? What question are they asking, or that they need to Google to learn it? So when we saw that one of the big updates out of a Polis press conference, one of our stories wasn't taking off, but we saw similar stories from other news sites taking off about that same topic, we sort of restructured what we were doing. The next day, we looked at similar stories, saw how they were shared. We used Google Trends to sort of compare keywords that were left out of our old story. We created a new headline, a more urgent story that was more reader-friendly and people could screenshot and share. And the results, and then we linked the two together. And then the result was a lot more SEO traffic, a lot more social shares, and a lot more social referral traffic too. So we sort of had to rethink what the reporter and editor were doing while they have other priorities too. How can the digital team take this over and maybe create a new SEO story out of that news?
So what we do, if we notice that traffic's kind of dwindling, we look for opportunities to leverage the moment. And a lot of what we do is we kind of repush the story on all the platforms, maybe update the language a little bit, but all with the kind of in case you missed it approach. And something that we've started doing recently too is to have what we call an appeal post. And it's an opportunity for the reporter to give readers kind of a behind the scenes look at that reporting, how he or she came to the story and why it's important to our mission. It also gives us an opportunity to have, increase numbers, give them opportunities to donate to our newsroom and to our cause. And then, Evan talked about the surveying. That's something that we're really interested in doing, is trying to find out the ways that why readers are coming to our site, and just learning from that experience. And we do a lot of text out where reporters are asking questions, where they can engage with readers about the story or the coverage. But it also has provided opportunities for our reporters to have some follow-up stories, because they're using that texting line to develop sources by kind of engaging in conversation about the stories that they've already published.
And so lastly, you'll want to just return to your analytics and take a look at the key areas that you made sure to set out in your analytics strategy at the beginning, in the planning phase, and take a look at the referral traffic that ties into what Francie mentioned for looking at how traffic came to your site using CrowdTangle, understanding new versus returning users, and the page depth. So for that engagement, where can you improve for next time? Understanding the conversions. So what actions did the readers take during the traffic spike? Was that what you were expecting? Is that what you were hoping for? How can that be shifted? And then really understanding the audience breakdown for the traffic as well. So at the end, just take a look at what would you change overall in terms of how you set up that reporting, but also in terms of your task force and your newsroom, those internal expectations around everything that you worked on and where you can go from there. So lastly here, we have some tools and resources that were mentioned throughout the presentation. You will be getting not only a recording that will be available of this, but also the slides, so you can link through. And on the next slide here, we have all of our contact information. So we highly recommend that you reach out to us directly with any questions you have that came out of this. We really appreciate you spending the time with us today. We do have a limited amount of time before we're all automatically brought back into that main conference session. So in the next 4 minutes or so, if you do have questions, put them in the chat. Otherwise, email us. And we hope you enjoy the rest of INN at home. Thank you all to the presenters as well.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. And do feel free to reach out.
Yes, thank you so much.
We've got a question here. Any good strategy to converting new social media followers to newsletter subscribers? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Sounds like a great question for Francie, or maybe Francie and Evan.
That's a great question. I don't have a good strategy for that. But we should talk. Sometimes, well, our breakout room is going to end in 115 seconds. I don't have a good strategy for that, but I would love to talk about it. And I bet if we put our heads together, we could come up with one.
Yeah, and one thought is if you have an email modal and you have the ability to track where the traffic is coming from, customize that language to the referral itself. So some of those modals you can say, oh, it'll recognize it's coming from Facebook. So you can actually tailor the message to Facebook users who are landing on your site and seeing that email modal. You can say, Bridge, Michigan has a really great one that says, don't rely on Facebook's algorithm to get your email, to get your news, get it emailed directly to you, sign up here. If you can't do that, you can always run Facebook posts of your newsletter, or you can even do paid acquisition on Facebook. But it's very, very tricky to convert folks from one platform to the next, especially with social.
Thanks, Francie. Thanks, Evan.